everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are doing very well. I'm very excited to bring you the third video in our Things I Wish I Knew as an Artist series. The first video was how I make money as an artist, talking about income streams, and then I did some mistakes that I made and lessons that I learned as an artist. For the third one, I thought that I would open up the dialogue a bit, and so on my Instagram, where I often do like prompts or share my stories and experiences, but I often give you guys the opportunity to write in as well, and then I share those with the community. I asked you guys, what is the hardest part about having a creative career? And honestly, every single one of those responses hit so hard. I want to talk about those today, whether it's loneliness, failure, money, and sort of the emotional behind the scenes cost that we don't really talk about, because yeah, like I feel like online everyone wants to sort of like glamorize doing art for a living, and obviously it's your passion, and so if you're able to, you know, follow that path as a creative career and do that, it's so magical. But I think it really is one of the loneliest careers that there is, which is such a paradox, because we create art so that we can connect to others, but just by its nature you have to do it alone, whether you're a writer or you're a painter. I think like myself, I spend like 90% of my time by myself, and I've been lonely for like my whole life, as long as I can remember. But also the reason is because when you are like diving into your inner world, you can only sort of do that by yourself, you know? And I sort of compare it to like, imagine if you can go to a cafe with 3 people, but it's like a cafe in the real world, and you know, they've got like, it's like a nice cafe, but it's kind of a boring cafe. Like, you know, not to say the people are boring at the cafe, but it's sort of just like the day-to-day life, you know? But then when you're alone and you go into your inner world, you are exploring like magical gardens and you are feeling alive. But imagine like you're doing all of that by yourself, and then you have to go back to the real world and sort of share with people what you found in that magical garden, you know? And it's like your creativity becomes your companion, so to speak. So in order, I think, to do this career, you have to be really okay with solitude, because you are going to be spending a lot of your time alone. And not just loneliness, like, you know, physically, but there's also like a mental loneliness to it, because you are carrying your project by yourself. It's not like you're a part of a big team and, you know, you guys can share the responsibilities of like this baby. A lot of times, you know, you are the only one that really cares about your project, and so you have to like carry it like a child, you know what I mean? And so I think like when you have highs and lows in your creative career, that can feel very lonely. I think that the solution is to like find ways to create with people more. For example, like collaborating on specific projects, or for me, for example, that's one of the big reasons I wanted to start a band and have a creative project in that regard, is that like we're sharing something that is sort of like, it's like we're going to the magic garden together, you know what I mean? The next thing that came up a ton when I was asking you guys what is the most difficult part of doing a creative career was the financial instability. The thing is about doing a creative career is, if you're working for yourself and doing art for a living, you can have 3 months of like really good business, and then the next 2 months you can have nothing at all. And so you have to really be okay with uncertainty. And on that note, I do want to take a moment to talk about today's video sponsor, which is Printful, because I think that it could be very inspiring to you guys who are looking to diversify your income as an artist. Printful is a print-on-demand service that helps artists and creators and entrepreneurs turn their work into physical products like art prints or tote bags, t-shirts. There's tons of different cool things that you can make on there. How it works is you upload your design. It could be a picture of a painting you made or an illustration that you made, and then you can put it on a product, for example, a t-shirt or a tote bag, and they take care of all of the rest, the shipping, the packaging. So you get to focus more on creating, which is what we all want. Printful only makes it once there is an order, which also means there's no upfront cost to you. So last time that I partnered with them, if you remember, I made this beautiful create and destroy tote bag, which I think is like the perfect artist tote bag. And today I thought that I would try my hand at making prints, and I'm gonna see just how quickly I can upload my paintings and make a beautiful print on their website.
I've actually been wanting to bring back these two prints of mine for a while. The Wild Horse Sleeps Alone print with a poem on the back, as well as It Was All Worth It. I only ever printed 50 of these each, and since then I've gotten messages all the time of people asking when I will restock them, so I thought it was the perfect moment, and I'm going to show you guys how I make these prints.
We're gonna go to printful.com, go to prints, and I'm going to decide the dimensions and everything, and I'm going to take my image. That looks good, and there you go. It's as easy as that. And then you can link your Wix or Shopify very easily. So if that interests you, I have left a link down below in the description box where you can check out Printful today.
I have also linked down below my web shop where you can find the restocks of the Wild Horse Sleeps Alone print and the It Was All Worth It print. So if you're interested in getting one of these prints, that will be linked down below as well.
Thank you so much to Printful for supporting independent artists like myself and allowing me to have another income stream, you know? That's the goal. The thing that's dangerous about doing art for a living is you're sort of like mixing the thing that enriches you with the thing that you need to survive. And so I think that what we often fall into is making work that we know is going to sell, or, you know, like having a sort of recipe that works. I know for myself, I have had periods where like I'll have like a painting drop, which is like I'll drop like a few paintings on my website and I'll sell all of them in the same week, and I'll be really encouraged and excited about it, you know, and I'll be like, oh my god, like this is like the direction I need to be going in. And then other times I've dropped painting, like had like a painting drop, and I haven't sold any. And it's really hard, I think, in those moments to not get discouraged and take that as like, this is the wrong move. And so I think that's the danger of doing art full-time as a living, because it's really hard not to get influenced by your customers, you know, because you want obviously to sell your work. It's weird because creativity is something that is such a flow energy, you know, and it's so abundant. And when you tap into, like, you know what I'm talking about, like when you get into that zone, when you're creating and you're just like sitting there for hours, it just feels like so abundant, you know. But I think oftentimes like finances has the opposite energy. It feels like very blocked. It feels very like scarcity, because I don't know, like I guess it also depends on like how you grew up, but there is this feeling of, you know, I need to survive. And I think one of the ways that you can combat that is by, before like launching yourself into being a full-time artist or having that like creative career, is having a savings. Like ask yourself, for example, if I didn't have work in the next 6 months, how much would I realistically need to feel comfortable? And if ever you start dipping into that, which I've definitely done in the past, then you sort of need to reevaluate. For example, the thing is like the savings is also for like a rainy day, or there's things that can happen. And so I guess like the more of the savings you can have, the better. But at the same time, I had you know, like you never know, you know, because this was a few years ago now, but like I had my sort of rainy day savings that was supposed to be like 6 months of work for me. And then there was an error with the French administration, because this is a long story, but basically they thought that I was supposed to be paying sales tax on the books that I was selling, but actually like I don't have to charge sales tax on those books because I sell them through KDP. It's an intellectual service that I'm giving. I'm not selling physical books, and so they actually collect the sales tax. But the French government like didn't know that, and so one day I just woke up and they had emptied all of my savings, and I was like, great. So like I really could see like the difference of having a savings and not having a savings, what that can do to your mental health and your emotional health. And you just have to like, I don't know, prepare mentally, you know what I mean? And just remind yourself that like, no matter what, I'm gonna be okay. The next thing that I want to touch on that hits very close to home is someone wrote in on the same question, like what is the most difficult thing about having a creative career? Is being your own boss, your own secretary, your own accountant sometimes, and having to self-motivate. And they said, especially with ADHD, this is something that I think I struggle with the most, is that, for example, when you have a typical 9 to 5, you're on the clock, baby. Like, you know that like subconsciously you're on somebody else's time and you're being watched as well. But when you're working from home, like, it's just you. Like, you could wake up and you could get straight to work, or you could have your coffee, or you could scroll, or you could read. Your resting place is also your workplace. And so I think, like, for example, some tips I have if you work from home is, for me, like, the first thing I'll do when I wake up is to make my bed, and I will create like a separation, because I live in a big studio. But for example, I'll oftentimes paint in my kitchen, and I have a room divider, and so I'll put up the divider and I'll be like, okay, while I'm working, I have to stay in this part of the room. And I think another way to combat that is to create rituals. For example, when I'm painting, I will oftentimes light a red candle. And then when I'm doing like any sort of administration work, for example, I don't know, like taxes or emails, this is gonna sound like so cringy, but like I'll put on my like really nerdy glasses, and that's when I know I have like my administration hat on, you know? And I also think one of the things that can be really, you know, kind of brutal about this is like the emotional shift from one hat to the other. It's like in one day you're wearing all of these different hats, and it can kind of feel like creative whiplash, you know, like 1 second you're in the flow, and then the next second you have like an important email, and then you're like, okay, taxes are due, and it's like all of these different things. And so I think that, like I said, one of the ways that like has helped me is by creating like really solid routine and boundaries. But even finding like that routine and having that discipline can feel like very draining at first, because you're like, oh yeah, I forgot, like I'm not supposed to do this. Like it feels like a lot of rules, you know, to follow. I was talking about this on a podcast I made recently for my Patreon, all about how to keep creating through a block, like a creative block, and keep showing up. I was talking about like something that I will often do is I imagine myself as the manager of myself. Like, for example, if someone hired you and they said, okay, you're gonna be the manager, imagine your name's Natalia. You're the manager of Natalia, and you got hired to be the artist manager for Natalia. you'd probably be like, okay, Natalia, like this is our strategy, this is what we're gonna do. And I think when it's you, we're a little bit more lax with it. But if you think of yourself like, I'm the manager of this artist Shayna, like I would do things a little bit more savage, like in the sense of I'd be more assertive, I'd be more strict with my time, etc. And so I think like having a mindset like that has helped me quite a bit. But yeah, I think creative burnout doesn't always come from making art so much, but it's all of the other things that we have to do. So I think the idea is to minimize those things as much as possible and have like the 80-20 rule, where it's like 80% creating and 20% of all of the rest. But I feel like honestly for me that hasn't been the case, like, and so that's something I'm going to be definitely working on in the new year, is finding a way to rebalance that.
The last thing that I want to touch on today in the emotional cost of being an artist, I feel like it's such a dramatic title, but also it fits, you know what I mean, is rejection. Because that was another thing that people wrote in a lot, is like believing in yourself despite the rejection. I think the thing that has really helped me the most is to detach myself and to not take it personally when I don't get something. You know, there's been so many art residencies, there's been so many expositions, and even like, for example, talking about making a print and then not selling, that is also a form of rejection. And to not take it personally, because if you do, then you're just going to be sad all the time, you know? And just to remember that like your art and the things that you make, it is you, but the things that you make are separate from yourself. Like, for example, I always talk about the fact that like I breathe every day. I don't even think about breathing anymore. And I've also created a practice where it's just a part of who I am. And so like, I'm not judging all of my breaths. I'm not like, oh, that breath was so good, and then like that breath sucked. And so it's the same with my art. It's like, I'm just gonna keep doing it. And so in that sense, like if you have a consistent practice, then it doesn't matter if one thing fails, because it's just a learning experience. I always say that as long as you're showing up consistently, you're winning and you're doing better than like 90% of people, because most people are never able to really detach themselves, and they see rejection as a personal thing, and so they give up. But like most people who have success in any aspect of their life, there's a lot of invisible years of labor, and not invisible to them, but like invisible to the outside world. Like you only start noticing somebody usually when they have reached a certain level, but that person probably did like so many hours of work by themselves in their room. I also think that like ultimately we have to do something and decide to do a creative career for motivation that doesn't come from external validation. Because actually, like when I think about it, the external validations are just like little pops over like a course of a few years. Like you'll have a period where like you'll have like a success and then nothing for like the next like 6 months. And so if you're living for like the external validation, then it's not going to be worth it to you. And so that's why I think if you do decide to do a creative career, you'll do it for like the love of it first, so that every day during the hard moments, it's worth it to you. Every day with the loneliness, every day with managing like 100 different hats on your head, whether that's secretary, boss, etc., you'll still find that the work itself is validating and like your most precious little jewel that you have. And so that will become the real win. And you showing up is a form of self-respect. And even if you get rejected from the outside world, you aren't rejecting yourself. And I think that's the most important thing, is to not reject yourself. And the only way that we really reject ourselves is by giving up on our work. I think that we can all agree that there's so many successful people out there, and you look at them and you think, I have 5 friends that are just as talented. But the thing is, in life, it's not about talent, it's about showing up consistently. And even on like the hard days, even on the days that you're blocked, and showing up regardless if there was applause, etc. So those are the people I think that are gonna find like true fulfillment, and why for me, like I always try to think about like the process and wanting to feel alive and challenging myself every time and doing things that scare me. I think that like we all are seeking in other people and people that we look up to, people who like we can feel and not just understand. And I think we want to feel something as well. So I think really pay attention in your life to like what moves you, and make a list of like what makes you feel something. Like there's certain people that make me feel something, and the reason they make me feel that way is because you can tell they're doing it from a place of like raw in the moment, and not because of like an outside package that'll get them validation. So to close out this video, I feel like I was very rambly in this, and it started out kind of slow because yeah, like I have myself like getting in front of the camera, like that is a form of, honestly YouTube is a form of rejection every week, because you have to sort of get used to talking to the camera, and it takes a little while to warm up. And like when you do a video and you put it out and it doesn't do well, and the next week it does, and you don't really understand why, like that is a form of rejection. So if you can get comfortable with that, that's great. But I also think that persistence is an art form in and of itself. It's a muscle. So just, I think something I've learned is to continue to create, whether you're having a rainy day or whether you're motivated, just show up despite the rejection, despite the occasional burnout, despite having to, you know, wear a million different hats, because that's when I think like the true rewards come in. And I think that ultimately the emotional cost is proof that it's something that matters to you, you know? I think that the expression is like nothing worth having in life comes easy. Sometimes that's not true. Like sometimes some things are easy, but I always find that those things are sort of a one-off. That's beginner's luck, and people get excited when they get that like one-off success, and then when in the future things don't go as easily, that's when they give up. But remind yourself that even during the dark days and even during the hard days, remember like you started doing this for a reason. You have a desire in your heart to create, to be this person, to share your work with the world for a reason. And if it costs you something, it's because it matters to you. So yeah, I think it's really beautiful that you care enough about something that sometimes it is hard, you know? So yeah, I will end this video here. Thank you guys so much for being here, for supporting my channel over all of these years, and I really hope to continue this series. Even for myself, it's a beautiful reminder. I love you guys so much. Keep creating no matter the cost, and remember, you're never alone. Love you. Bye.